Here on This Will Happen, we embrace the challenge of looking into an uncertain future and identifying those trends and events where we can look at you and say, this will happen. If, as many had feared last week, that Kim Jong-un had in fact passed away, or his health was in grave jeopardy, what does this mean for the North Korean regime? The North Korean regime has been governed by the Kim family now for 3 generations with no designated successor. Its economy is in free fall. People are starving. North Korean soldiers, when they flee across the border and get medical checks in South Korea, are found to be with parasites throughout their digestive tract. How long can this continue? History tells us tyrannical regimes and police states like North Korea generally don't last forever. You've got 25 million starving North Koreans. Well, here with us today to discuss all these is one of my favorite statesmen of the last 3 or 4 decades, Mr. Leon Panetta. This gentleman has served multiple presidents in the executive branch. He was also a longtime member of California's congressional delegation, director of the Office of Management and Budget, White House Chief of Staff, Secretary of Defense, and Director of the CIA. Well, welcome, Mr. Secretary. It's truly an honor to have you here with us. Today, we're talking about North Korea and the coming economic and demographic time bomb that is going to go off sooner or later on the Korean Peninsula and its import for the American public. Well, last week, the world was reminded to a degree of the fragility of the Kim regime, which has been ruled now for 3 generations by that family. And the junior Kim, Kim Jong-un, continues to suffer from the ailments. Should he come to a bad end by removal or death of natural causes or incapacitation, what then for North Korea? How stable is the North Korean regime?
It's a very uncertain situation with North Korea. As a CIA director, I have to tell you, and I think it's still true today, understanding how they survive, understanding the maneuverings that are going on in North Korea. It's been very difficult to try to determine just exactly what happens if that regime comes to an end, and why have the people of North Korea been willing to kind of live under kind of tyranny in very poor economic conditions in a regime that obviously is very authoritarian. Why has North Korea been able to sustain itself under the Kim family's clout? And there isn't a good answer to that, except that they've operated with tremendous viciousness in the way they've governed there. They've dominated that society. They've killed the family members. They've killed people that threatened their control. I think you could have a serious disruption.
Especially in the intelligence side, are more aware of what goes on in the world than are your military conscripts or junior officers. At some point, Kim Jong-un in particular hasn't delivered for North Korea or the North Korean elites in terms of economic relief and economic benefits. Is there the possibility of some sort of coup or removal of Kim Jong-un for failure to deliver by elements of the intelligence security services and the military?
Again, that's a question we've been asking ourselves for a very long time, because it's pretty clear that economically North Korea is not only a third world country. It's probably worse than that in terms of the population, and what they're doing is, some people have said that people that are working in rural areas sometimes resort to eating dirt because things are so bad economically. And why are they not reacting? We've asked that question time and time again. So I don't think you can just assume that if there is a change, that the people will go through an uprising and suddenly try to gain control of the governance structures in North Korea, because it hasn't happened.
Yeah.
We haven't seen, at least from the intelligence point of view, any indication that there are movements within North Korea.
How long do you think the status quo in North Korea is tenable until something has to give?
I don't envision that things are going to change very soon in North Korea. We still don't know what exactly the physical problem was that Kim, whether he went through surgery or whether he was just trying to avoid the COVID-19 virus. The family has had a record of having health problems, and he's inherited a lot of that. And if something should happen to him, the real question is whether the military leadership decides to make a move to try to gain control, or whether they will stand back and allow the Kim family to again succeed here, going to possibly his sister. It will be a very uncertain period. Then I think we could be on a shorter fuse in terms of North Korea. If that isn't the case, and he was just, he's still maintaining relative health in his position, then I think we're looking at the long term.
If North Korea becomes unstable, what indications would we have? What do we look for if we are starting to see a sea change in North Korea?
They do have missile capability. They've developed a mobile missile system that makes it much more difficult to anticipate what would happen. And I guess the first thing you would see is a mobilization of the military to be able to ensure that the military has control of not only the weapons, but also the other mobile missile systems, the missile systems that are there, the other military weaponry that is part of North Korea, to make sure that South Korea, either the South Korea or the United States, tries to take advantage of a situation that is very volatile in North Korea. The real issue would be who is moving to the top, who is going to control that kind of effort to maintain stability, because the only thing they know in North Korea is to stabilize using military force.
History says that revolts have two different origins. One is the bottom-up popular revolt, and the other is a coup led by leadership in that society. If you do see something like this, it would come from the upper reaches of the North Korean government, for whom Kim Jong-un has failed to deliver. And what does their command and control look like if there is instability?
I don't think there's any question that that would be the more likely scenario if that were to happen. Military leaders, political leaders within the party who have stature and power in the capital, they would be the ones to come together, because their fundamental interest would be in protecting their position in North Korea. And so I think the likelihood is that they would establish some kind of power center there. I think we know pretty much about the upper ranks of the military leadership. As you said, they are considered the elite. But because of that situation, there are questions about whether or not junior officers and those in the lower ranks would respond to new leadership, and how they would respond to new leadership. They are disciplined, there's no question about it. I think that's something that we would have to watch very closely, whether or not if the military decides to take over in some way, whether or not the discipline that exists today would continue with new leadership.
If there is a collapse in the North Korean regime, where do 25 million North Koreans go? Would China tolerate a reunified Korean peninsula under Seoul? What happens then? Enormous implications here.
China has been very concerned about the instability in North Korea. They were very concerned about their development of nuclear weapons, and they expressed to me that they had a very difficult time communicating with North Korea and understanding where they were coming from, and that frustrated them, of course, because they are worried about instability there and the threat that constitutes to China. So China is not going to stand back and just allow things to go as they will in North Korea. Their national security, from their perspective, is dependent on what happens in North Korea. So they will certainly influence the direction of North Korea. There's been, as you know, a lot of discussion, particularly in South Korea, about the possibility of unifying South and North Korea in the future. And obviously the hope, I think, of many in the South is that ultimately that can happen. But China is not going to be supportive of the ability to unify South and North Korea, because if that happens, the South will largely dominate, I think, what happens because of their economic strength, because of their governance strength. It's clear that the North will begin very rapidly to look like the South. And I'm not sure that China wants to have that kind of competitive on their border. So they will try everything they can within their power to develop some kind of stable that probably keeps the regime in place.
This is one strange situation in history where our interests and arguably the Chinese, the South Koreans, the Japanese are all aligned, because the warheads that would give certain military commanders outsized leverage. It seems to me that Beijing and the United States should work together on this in terms of at least some degree of contingency planning.
I think you're absolutely right. I don't see the United States to influence what happens in North Korea anywhere close to the influence that China would have. China knows the players. China deals with those players. China has expressed concern to our diplomats. They've expressed it directly to me in conversations I've had with them about stability of North Korea and the fact that they do have nuclear arms. That would be the greatest concern. That if there is instability in the capital, the Kim regime is collapsing, military leaders are taking over, that you're not quite sure what levels of control exist in order to protect against the possibility that somebody may decide to push the button, one of these mobile missiles. Now, having said that, as far as we know, even though they develop nuclear weapons, I'm not aware of intelligence that indicates that they have in fact been successful at being able to place one of those nuclear weapons at the top of a missile. But if they have continued to develop their nuclear capability, that I think is the cause for concern, that would have us doing everything necessary with the South Korea, with China, with others, even Russia, that might have some influence, some degree of stability there. Well, I would assume that that China would be the principal player if something happened in North Korea. They would be the principal player we would look to try to determine whether or not stability could be restored in North Korea. I mean, South Korea obviously would be very concerned.
I very much appreciate your time. Thank you so much, sir. It was an honor working with you today.
Good to be with you.
Today we got to talk to one of the deans of American Public Service in former Secretary and Director Leon Panetta. He highlighted for us cult of personality in North Korea and understand that the North Korean regime isn't completely stable, and any health concerns by Kim Jong-un are a potential problem for the rest of the world. The United States and China, while bitterly at odds over a wide range of issues, do have a common interest and common cause in ensuring the stability of North Korea. 25 million North Koreans, their future hangs in the balance, and their future will impact relationships between the United States, China, South Korea, and Japan, as well as the world economy. Thank you for joining us here on This Will Happen, where we embrace the challenge of looking into that uncertain future, no matter how scary, and we remember that respect, freedom, and prosperity are for everyone. Thank you. I'm John Jordan.